NC pork, good for the plate, great for the state. Hello, Carolina, and welcome back into another edition of Timeout, the Tobacco Road basketball show. I'm Mike Waddell, and as always, I'm here to make sure that you're following us on all of our social media here at NCSN, at the NC Sports Net. Subscribe on YouTube, closing in on 65,000 subscribers now. Thank you very much. And catch everything that we're doing on ncsportsnetwork.com, our award-winning website. You don't want to miss it. We have new stuff coming up there every single day. And here is where we are heading in this episode. We're going to hit all of the big four programs today, and let's get into it. As always, he is our go-to guy for the last 40 plus years. This guy has been talking basketball up and down the East Coast. He's a native of Philly, so he has the best tips on how to keep your driveway slippery free and ice resistant. We're talking about David DG Glen. How you doing, David?
I'm doing well, Mike. Bunkered down here at the Glen estate in North Raleigh and hoping everything is melted by the time many folks get around to watching our show or listening.
Kerry Keating, he is the coach. He too from the tri-state area, so we'll get some great snow removal tips from the former Santa Clara head coach. He's also been an assistant coach at UCLA, 2 Final Fours. Kerry Keating, welcome in, Coach.
Literally chilling with the sub-freezing temperatures, but enjoying every minute of it as the kids get an extra day off and an extra long weekend.
Before we touch on all of the big four programs, go into some big national discussion items too, guys. What's burning in your belly after another great weekend of early basketball? A lot of the games were moved up with their tip-off times thanks to the Snowmageddon hitting the Tobacco Road area. But what was the residual that came out of your day of watching basketball there, DG?
There's a lot going on because given my legal background, my phone has been ringing off the hook because of some basketball players that have either been plugged in at midseason or used to be professionals or filed a lawsuit and won, and now they're being plugged in at Alabama or somewhere else. But the basketball side, I think it's been fun to watch. Carolina, for example, reverse its fortunes from that nightmarish trip to the West Coast to maybe its best victory of the season, going to Charlottesville right before the big ice and snowstorm and beating the Cavaliers on their home court. Meanwhile, Duke's getting better. They were already good. NC State, I think, still has plenty of room for growth. And as you mentioned, there are teams beyond the big four that are well positioned to make a run at a conference championship and NCAA tournament bid. So it's a little bit of everything here in late January on the hard court.
And a little bit of history, too, on top of that. We had 3 freshmen in the first day for the first time in notable history score 40 points on the same day, and not 40 points collectively each. We all know how talented this freshman class is, obviously highlighted by the local talent in Caleb Wilson, but there are some really good freshmen out there, and it either seems that defenses have gone by the wayside or that the coaches have just thrown caution to the wind and letting the freshmen cook, as they like to say, and earn the bag that they've obviously earned up to this point. 19 players yesterday got 30 points, 7 of them freshmen. The game is obviously getting older with all of the influx of the portal and transfers and retreads and regens from the G League and every league that's over the pond. But let's not forget there are some really talented freshmen out there, and they were on display yesterday. The freshman at Houston had 42. I think there was a freshman at BYU had 43. The freshman at Illinois had 46 against Purdue. These are not just against the Sisters of the Poor in the early November season. This is the heart of conference play right now. And you've got freshmen on full display. Makes for a fun future or a very rich one, depending on which angle you look at it.
If you're one of those young players right now, you're also getting used to a longer season. You've been in full-time basketball mode ever since pretty much August. So right now, Coach, how are you keeping these guys fresh and their minds receptive to all of the new things that they're experiencing as first-year basketball players?
I used to love this time of year because you can get lost in the sauce when the bracketology comes out. We're obviously living in a digital age where everything is totally accessible, and you can hide these things, and you can also trick your team. I remember when I was a freshman playing for PJ at Seton Hall, this was about the time of year, joke not, he would go on a blackboard, not even a whiteboard, a blackboard with chalk, and write up the standings of the league, where we were at, what we had left on the road away. I'm thinking back to it now, how poignant it is, because now these kids are getting that up to the minute, up to the second. So you can get accelerated and see the bright lights of what a bracket looks like if you're still one of those kids who wants to play in March Madness and is not here on a pit stop on the way to making a lot more money. So I think as a coach, it's really important that you get them focused on day to day, week to week, but now it's like a month to month. And we always used to say, as this kind of evolved into the 2000s and more access to information, can't get to March without going through February. And I know there's a whole plethora of people who think those last 10, 12 games are really important for selection purposes. They're really important for your team if you're going to be going into postseason to build momentum, because that momentum can be real in both directions, and you clearly want it on the positive side. I was always excited as we got towards the end of January because football season's ending, the Super Bowl, college bowl season, and now it's really all focused on college basketball come February, although next year we'll have a third week in February Super Bowl. Notwithstanding, I think it's dominated by some high-level basketball that obviously leads into what we know as March Madness.
And before you get to March Madness, you got to get through this part in the season. And DG, North Carolina had a disastrous week last week out in California, losing both at Stanford and at Cal. They come home this week, get two big wins. And you and I are texting back and forth during the game on Saturday, as we often do. And I'm at wit's end as the lapsed Carolina fan that I am, sitting there going, man, what's going on? But Hubert Davis and the Tar Heels really came out with a magnificent second half, and that took a lot of character to go into John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville and come back out with the win. Virginia is much improved, but Carolina the better team on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I think the Carolina question has a fascinating answer right now, because Carolina has pretty quickly gone from that embarrassment of getting swept by middle of the pack Cal and Stanford teams on that West Coast trip you mentioned, and really an embarrassing 4-game run defensively that we discussed on last week's show, to now those back-to-back victories you just mentioned. Notre Dame expected, but then Virginia with that win in Charlottesville against one of the best teams in the ACC. It required a lot of grit, resilience through major adversity, large deficits, given the Tar Heels were trailing for most of that game and sometimes by double digits against the Cavaliers. We know that the Tar Heels have at least 2 championship caliber big men, right? You got Caleb Wilson that Coach mentioned, one of the best players in the entire country. Junior center Henry Vessar. He was not great in Charlottesville, but he's proven himself as one of the top transfers in the ACC. Junior forward Jaron Stevenson did at Virginia what he did: 17 points off the bench, a couple of clutch three-pointers. He hit all of his free throws. He showcased his defensive versatility as that athletic 6'10" guy from the Chapel Hill area who returned to the Tar Heels after his time at Alabama. Just displayed a lot of effort and confidence at both ends of the court that I think his teammates seemed to feed off of. It was another incredibly positive development for that Carolina big man rotation, because they don't have much depth for Hubert Davis beyond those 3 big guys. But what's far less certain about the Tar Heels, whether back in November through their roller coaster ride or here on the cusp of February, is their backcourt. And when UNC's guards play well, the Heels can beat anyone in this league, including Duke. When UNC's guards struggle, as they did against an outstanding SMU backcourt in that loss, or against a brilliant guard like Stanford's freshman Abuka Okori in that loss to the Cardinal out west, when those Carolina guards struggle, the Heels look like a middle-of-the-pack ACC team that could lose to almost anyone in the league, especially on the road. The most important recent development in Carolina's entire season was Hubert Davis's decision to elevate the true freshman Derek Dixon over the Colorado State veteran transfer Kyan Evans as the team's starting point guard. That happened midway through the team's West Coast road trip, and it's already paid some big dividends. The numbers in the UVA game, Mike, jumped off the page. I don't know if you guys saw this number. When Derek Dixon was in the game, Carolina outscored UVA by 22 points. When Kyan Evans was in the game, it was the reverse. UVA outscored Carolina by 17 points. just to repeat that so people know they heard it correctly, in the Tar Heels' biggest victory of the year on the road against the top 25 team in a hostile environment, Derek Dixon, the freshman, was plus 22, and Kyan Evans, the former starter, was minus 17. That is about as extreme as it gets for two guys who are mostly rotating at the same position. For those who don't know, Dixon was ranked in the top 50 as a high school senior in Washington, D.C., which has some really good prep basketball, but he was not considered one of the 10 best freshmen to enter the ACC this season. Dixon's about 6'5", 200 pounds, which is pretty good size for a point guard, and he seems to have a lot of mental toughness and a relatively unflappable demeanor, which is especially uncommon for a freshman, and I think especially important in road games like the one the Heels just won at Virginia. Dixon, as we speak, is averaging only about 6 points per game, but he is a far more physical and effective defender than Kyan Evans, who's only about 6'2" and 175 pounds. And Dixon has been gaining confidence with each passing week. Just as Evans seemed to lose some of his confidence, converting 45% of his three-point attempts at Colorado State last season, but making only 31% of his threes with the Tar Heels, maybe because he's being asked to be more of a point guard in Chapel Hill. Meanwhile, Derek Dixon has a better assist-turnover ratio than Evans. He's hitting 43% of his three-point attempts, Dixon. He plays better defense, and he has what appears to be a quiet confidence about him that I think his teammates feed off of as well. Meanwhile, in the Virginia game, guys, Luka Bogovac, the 22-year-old newcomer from Montenegro, who had the reputation as a sharpshooter in Europe, but has mostly struggled with his shooting during his time in Chapel Hill this season. He came off the bench in Charlottesville and hit 3 of his 5 three-point attempts. That was a big lift from the backcourt, and Dixon, of course, ends up with 7 assists, only 1 turnover against the Cavaliers. That's a big lift from a much criticized backcourt. And the steady senior Seth Trimble had a very effective day at both ends of the court at UVA. One question I'm going to have for Coach Kerry Keating is how he would handle that upside down chemistry where you have to hand the keys to the car to a true freshman point guard. Meanwhile, the guy you thought would be your point guard starter all year long, Kyan Evans, is in a funk, maybe questioning himself and getting fewer minutes than probably he expected when he signed. But a final thought on this before I throw it to Coach. Hubert Davis is obviously distributing backcourt minutes by feel right now, unlike his own coach at Carolina, Dean Smith, who was much more steady, predictable, almost mechanical with how he handled playing time decisions. At Virginia, UNC guard Jaden Young started the game at wing guard, but he didn't look very good as the Tar Heels fell behind by double digits. Young ended up playing as a starter only 7 minutes in the entire game. Same game, Luka Bogovac this time comes off the bench, but he looked really comfortable. He looked confident. He hit some threes. He, off the bench, ends up playing 28 minutes, whereas he had only played 9 minutes in a recent game against Wake Forest. Carolina does not have an elite guard on this team. Trimble can be very good, but nobody would compare him to the best of R.J. Davis or Joel Berry or Marcus Page or Reggie Bullock or Wayne Ellington or other guys of the last couple decades. Because of Carolina's outstanding big men, this UNC team can win at a high, but only if the backcourt continues to be steady and reliable and maybe even occasionally great. This new rotation begins with a solid veteran in Seth Trimble on the wing and a quickly improving freshman in Derek Dixon at point guard. After that, on any given day, could be Bogovac, could be Young, could be Jonathan Powell, could be Kyan Evans, unless he falls by the wayside, who gets more playing time in this game, makes bigger contributions in that game, depending on how they look in the flow of a contest in the eyes of Hubert Davis. I still would not call Carolina an elite team, but if the Tar Heels guard play continues to improve, this year's roller coaster is going to have a lot more peaks than valleys the rest of the way.
Let me throw a little icing on that cake as far as the plus minus goes and really highlight it. That plus minus discrepancy that DG pointed out between Dixon and Evans happened in a 26-minute spread. 26 minutes being the difference between Derek Dixon's 33 and Kyan Evans' 7 minutes. So it's pretty glaring when you have a short stint that results in a minus 17 like that, especially when you're at that point guard spot. I think the easy thing to point to in this is that there may be more of an ability of Dixon to defend than Evans. And sometimes when you come in with success from a different program, and although I wouldn't say programs that are known for their defensive identities in Colorado State and North Carolina necessarily, you come in with some defensive warts that may be hard to overcome. And on the case of Derek Dixon, he may not have those warts just yet, even though you always have some coming from high school. But he only knows what he knows as far as the collegiate level, being his only stop has been at Carolina so far. And I say stop, hoping that it's the only place he's at for Tar Heel fans. But 7 assists and 1 turnover is the true measure of whatever point guard is out there. And I think when you're trying to compare point guards, it's can you defend your position? But in this case now, can you defend multiple positions with size? And I think Dixon gives you a little bit more of that ability than Evans does. And maybe that's something that they saw, but then it also translates into staying on the floor more. And if you're on the floor more, and this is really the key in my mind of the whole entire game, is that they had 4 turnovers as a team in the entire game. They became offensively defensive because you really don't want to be giving up 80 points and expect to be winning games. You're not going to get into car races and try to go faster all the time and score more. But if you're not turning the ball over, you're going to have a chance to win almost any game, anytime. 4 turnovers is elite. 8, 9, 10, that's pretty high level number to keep at. You could get away maybe with some low teens or maybe 11 and 12 if you're a pretty good defensive team that can keep possessions low and be an elite defensive rebounding team. But I think that's the biggest difference in the game. 4 turnovers and only 1 coming from the guy, a freshman, who's playing the majority of your minutes at that point position. And I got to give our staff here, the NCSN, a little bit of credit for calling Jaren Stevenson to be an X factor, as we talked about a couple weeks ago. And they went to him late. They ran an empty side pick and roll with Caleb Wilson. They put him in a lot more ball screen actions. And the empty side for fans out there means there's no one that's on the backside when Wilson's rolling. But what happened late to seal the game is, as Wilson was rolling, they brought Stevenson up behind him, and he made a huge 3. By the way, right after he took a charge on the other end. So here's a guy that's coming off the bench to help close out the game when your star 5-man is in foul trouble for the majority of the game and really puts up a goose egg for you on the road. I think that bodes well for Carolina. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep building on that. I thought it was pretty interesting also. They tried a little bit of full court pressure early on, got a few turnovers, and Seth stepped up and made some big shots. So they got a little bit more of a committee than just Visar and Caleb show all the time, which is what it's been up to this point. And that may be, as Mike talked about early on, we were discussing about the times of the season. This may be the right time as they get into February. They're finding a little bit more chemistry. Now, to your point, David, about how do you balance out a high-level transfer with expectations, not just for him, but for the entire team and program versus a freshman at the same position? You almost now are forced to treat them all the same because you're all on 1-year leases right now. Whether you're coming from another program or whether you're one of these star freshmen that can come in and play at a high level and move on to greener pastures at either a place that's going to pay you twice as much or into the NBA, which is where everyone should to get to. It's a real challenge for the staff. We talked last week about high-level staffs and high-level managers, head coaches, managers now, CEOs, having a consigliere, if you will, someone that they ultimately trust with their life to make decisions for them about all the ancillary things that have to go on that may pull them away from coaching the team. This one's a little bit different. This is more of a player personnel deal where you have to have, whether it's the same person or not, and it can be, really take almost a neutral view between the program and the kid and try to mesh them together. Because there will be a time at some point before the season's over, and we don't know at what level, where they're going to need Kyan Evans to win a game. It's going to happen. Just like we talked about how Jaren Stevenson's going to come off the bench and he just made good on that. This is going to happen. It behooves the staff to keep him involved and not settle for the fact that, yes, I was successful at Colorado State. I had a great postseason game against Memphis. I proved I can do it. And you're paying me here. And now there's still someone out there, if he left next year, that would pay him. He knows that. His agent probably knows that. And I don't know him personally. I'm just speaking in generalities. But it behooves the staff to kind of really manage this a lot more than you used to. Because in the old days, and I say the old days because it was maybe 5 years or so ago, You could paint a picture of the future and development, even in a transfer. You could give them the development picture. Maybe it's not working out short term, but we're going to work towards the end result here. Now the end result is like next week, like next month. So it's a condensed time frame, and it really puts the onus on the staff to make sure they're paying attention to that on a day-by-day basis, not so much week by week, month by month, as we may have done in the past.
And it's the same thing that happened last year and the year before and the year before. North Carolina basketball routinely will get down by double digits under head coach Hubert Davis. The win over the weekend at Virginia was incredible. What a comeback for the Tar Heels on the road. But Kerry, Keating, David Glen, why the hell does Carolina have to get down by double digits before they come out and show a little bit of sack?
I think it was just a matter of getting the lineup right. Obviously, we started Jaden Young, brought Luke off the bench. You had a guy in Jaron Stevenson off the bench, and then the emergence of Derek Dixon like this in a full-time role. I think it's just a matter of a get-right game for them. The question is, will it travel the next time around the road, and what will the lineup be moving forward to start those games out?
Some coaches describe the essence of coaching as getting their players to fight human nature as much as possible. And one way to express that is, how much of a captive audience did Hubert Davis have when the Tar Heels were off to that? At one point, I think they were 13-1. You're still saying that this needs to be addressed. This needs to improve. You guys need to handle this better. And you hope they're listening, and they're probably being respectful, but how much is being digested? When you get your tail kicked 3 times in 4 games, when you give up record eye-popping numbers of points to SMU and Cal and Stanford, the human instinct is to start listening, because as a young person, you're starting to wonder what the heck is going on here. And is this season about to get away? So I think Hubert Davis has a more captive audience, along with personnel changes that have made bad defense get better. I think that he has a more captive audience. Guys who are, they were listening before, but now they're really listening because they didn't like what just happened 4 straight times. So it's a combination of factors, as it usually is. This is not an elite Carolina team, Mike. It is going to fall behind sometimes. It just is. But those rotation tweaks, and I think more of a passion for playing defense, may allow that script you described to happen at least less frequently going forward, but it's still going to happen.
Basketball nights in the bold North State? They're built on passion, tradition, and the best barbecue and bacon in America. Our pig farmers deliver the smoky, savory flavors fans love, while contributing more than $10 billion to the North Carolina economy. So every time you crush a pulled pork sandwich at halftime or grab a crispy strip of bacon before tip-off, remember the farmers who make it possible. North Carolina pork, good for the plate, great for the state. Learn more at ncpork.org.
Hey Wolfpack Nation, you already know that when we talk about the great traditions of NC State athletics, Joe's Italian restaurant is right at the heart of it. Since 1963, it's been the go-to spot for generations of Pack fans. The walls tell the story, the food seals the deal, and every visit feels like part of the family. Whether it's pre-game pasta, post-game celebrations, or just a night out on Western Boulevard, Amedio's delivers every single time. Great people, great plates, and pure NC State pride. Stop by Amedio's, a true Wolfpack original.
NC State had a big week with the win over Pittsburgh. The Wolfpack trailing early in this game on the road up at Pittsburgh, David Glen. If Will Wade's team gets some confidence going, DG, they're going to be really dangerous and only going to get better and better as this season goes on and they get to know each other.
Yeah, the Wolfpack is still proving itself because there are still only 2 really high-quality victories on the Pack's entire resume at this point. But that recent overtime win at Clemson, holding on against Pitt was fine. But the win at Clemson was a huge step in the right direction because I thought it immediately became State's most impressive victory of the season. You're on the road, top 25 opponent. Tigers otherwise were 10-0 on their home court. The Tigers appear very likely to be an NCAA tournament team and maybe even a good healthy seed. So that was huge. At the same time, not long ago, State had that home loss to Georgia Tech. That was a bit of a red flag because the Yellow Jackets got too many easy baskets in the paint and they out-rebounded the Wolfpack by a pretty wide margin. This NC State team does a lot of things well, balanced scoring. They have 5 guys in or very close to double figures. Almost 40% three-point shooting as a team. At different times, they've been top 5 in the country or top 10 out of 350-some teams. That's pretty darn good. Lots of steals and creating turnovers on the defensive side under Will Wade. But the Wolfpack is not a very big basketball team, by ACC standards anyway. And it sometimes loses the battle of the boards, and sometimes it loses the battles in the paint. With all due respect to our North Carolina Sports Network buddy, Van Allen Lubin, he's an undersized center. So whereas he has wonderful and beautifully soft touch and skill and production at the offensive end for a man of his size, he is not much of a shot blocker, just numerically speaking, at maybe 6'8". And he's usually matched against guys who are 2, 3, 4, 5 inches taller than he is. I don't think there are any easy answers for Will Wade and the Wolfpack when it comes to those rebounding and interior defense issues. It's just going to require that 5-man effort, whoever's on the court at any given time, to minimize those flaws. But at the same time, Mike, I think the Wolfpack can get even better at some of the things that it already does well. And I think there are individual players who have done some good things, but still have room for improvement and this season. And that's an exciting feeling for any coach, any fan base, including Wolfpack Nation here. For example, while I think some of the criticism of Texas Tech transfer Darian Williams has been overblown, most of his numbers are very similar to what he did last year for the Red Raiders when he was first team All Big 12. And his three-point shooting is actually much better for the Wolfpack than it was last season for the Red Raiders. It is also clear that he hasn't been at his best so far, so maybe he finds another gear down the stretch for the Pack. Another transfer, 6'6" forward Terrence Arsenault. He came from the Houston Cougars. He has a reputation as a gritty glue guy, but he was slowed by injuries when he arrived in Raleigh, and it's taken him a little longer to just find his fit. Maybe with increased minutes, he can help with some of those defensive issues, some of those rebounding issues as a rough and tumble guy on the wing. Ideally, the 2 freshmen in the rotation at NC State, it's Matt Abel on the wing, and it's Moussa Sanye in the post. Ideally, they will be better versions of themselves in February and March than they were earlier this season. We're seeing it with Derek Dixon as a freshman at UNC, right? There are a lot of freshmen in this league who are in the process of becoming much better versions of themselves. And if the Wolfpack can make that happen with those 2 guys, it would be a huge lift for them as they try to work to get more firmly on the right side of the NCAA bubble. The Sanye kid, 6'10", 235 pounds, that obviously at his best, he should be able to help with post defense and shot blocking and on the boards. He is about to turn 23 years old, as we've emphasized as a theme with a lot of these imports from other parts of the world. So maybe Sanye is what he's going to be if he's 23. But with Matt Abel, who I think has been one of the 10 most talented freshmen in the entire ACC this season, even coming off the bench, the hope would be for him to just continue on that more traditional old school freshman learning curve, taking smarter shots, avoiding defensive lapses, building better chemistry with your teammates, knowing what your coach wants in certain situations. I think Abel is a special talent. Credit to Will Wade and his staff for signing him. He's averaging about 8 or so points per game, 37% from three-point land. So he has already shown his value and his talent. It's just a matter of improvement for him down the stretch. I also think the senior guard, Trey Holloman, the Michigan State transfer, has more to offer. He's been a good three-point shooter, really good for the Wolfpack, but he can be better with his ball handling, his poise, his decision-making, and his defense. Last thought on the Wolfpack for me, in the opening scene of the movie Stripes decades ago, you remember that one? The Bill Murray character says to a woman who is leaving him behind in their relationship, his response to her as she departs is, "Talk about massive potential for growth. I am the acorn who becomes the oak. I think this year's Wolfpack right here in the Oak City still has massive potential for growth too. And that growth really could come in handy soon because the Pack has road trips coming up quickly to Wake Forest really soon, then SMU and Louisville. And those latter trips especially won't be easy, but would provide great opportunities for super resume boosters for Will Wade and his club.
What the hell is Will Wade doing better than Kevin Keats did last year as the head coach of NC State basketball?
Aside from having a bigger treasure chest of money to pay guys to come on, I think he's identifying guys' roles pretty clearly. DG read my mind because as I was going back and looking at their games of their main five, and one thing that Will is clearly doing is shortening his rotation. Bobby Cremins was legendary for only having 8 guys on the roster, period. I don't even know if he had a 9th guy on the bench. You only need 8, and that's the number where you can have a rotation. But you have at least 4 of the 5, and I think only 4 of the 5 starters, and Williams and Lubin, McNeil, and Copeland have led the Wolfpack in scoring. And by the way, I think in each of the last 5 games, it's been a different player almost every time. So whereas the expectations of Darian Williams to be that guy every game is tempered a little bit by a distribution network of Copeland, McNeil, our guy, and Alan Lubin, I think it's more defining the roles and finding the guys. And Will hinted at that early on. I think he's pretty intelligent in seeing where things can go and was trying to give people a glimpse like, we're going to find the right guys. We've almost been blessed with this embarrassment of riches so I can go out and get as many as possible. And I got news for you. If 3 or 4 of those guys don't work out, Will's going to take the adage of most of these coaches out there. It ain't our money. Now it is, and I think he's respectful of that. But I think he's more apt to let it move on than let it fester. He's going to really, within the framework of the season, this is just my take, really try to narrow the focus and figure out which 5, 6, 7, 8 guys he can trust. Hopefully keep them healthy. And I think what it resulted was, DG got ahead of this as he normally does, was 2 road wins. I can't remember which coach it was. As I mentioned earlier, my college coach before the days of social media used a blackboard and put up at this time what the standings were in the games that were left. We had another coach that actually valued road wins twice as much as home wins and had a formula for that. It would give road wins 2 points. Now, not that we're playing English Premier League soccer and keeping win of ties and losses and draws and goals for and against on a table for relegation, but the sentiment is that when you can go on the road and win, there's some real value to that. And although it may not be as much value, it is valued for the selection committee and road wins. So there is something to that mathematically. And when I looked at NC State's schedule, obviously them being here in town, when can we go watch them again? I saw them a couple times December. Wasn't crazy about how they were playing. It clear they were looking for something, or Will was trying to find something. There's not a clean, really good-looking home slate. They have to go on the road for their better games. Tougher games, yes, but more aesthetically pleasing games for the viewers out there. They're on the road. So it's all right in front of them. And I think we mentioned this the last time. They would probably have to have at least 6, if not 8 road wins to be at a favorable seed. They can probably still get 4 or 5 and get in at a decent seed, but now turn around after 2 road wins. And keep in mind, this was the other thing I used to tell people all the time when I got to be a head coach and we were talking amongst ourselves about scheduling. The league always goes 500. I don't know why people couldn't figure this one out. And there was one guy we can go back and reference. I don't want to put him on blast, who couldn't figure out that like the league. Wait, but there's the same amount of games. So I say that because at some point when you do the math and it travels through the league, the teams that you're beating are playing the other teams. So let's take Pitt. Pitt still has to play Duke and Carolina. Those are going to boost their numbers up. And in hindsight, boost NC State numbers up. Where do they sit now? 27 in the net. 27 in the net, you're looking at a 6 or better seed. And 6 or better seeds historically have had really good paths to have a chance to play in the second weekend. Now we'll put that together to find more out of Williams. He's getting a lot out of Copeland. As DG mentioned, he's squeezing every inch, no pun intended, out of Van Allen Lubin. And now he's got to find some guys off the bench to plug and play. But you're going to find some games where if Holloman can get his act together and actually come with the Michigan State prowess that he possesses, you're going to see 5 guys playing 30 minutes or more when it comes down to tournament time. The challenge is when you get to the ACC tournament, back-to-back days become very daunting. So you still have to keep 6, 7, and 8 somewhat fresh and ready to go. I think what you're seeing now is a whittling down in the funnel. It's the old sales adage, and I think Will's a smart guy. Get your top of funnel as big as it possibly can be. Throw as much as you can in there, because at the end, we only need this. He knew he only needed 8 guys. So let me go out and spend all this. Let's do all we can. Let's do what we have to do to get a huge top of the funnel. And then when we have to close the sale February, March, we'll know who the guys are we can close with, and we'll get to those 8 guys. I think you're starting to see that funnel become a little bit more narrow right now if you're an NC State Wolfpack fan.
Great restaurants don't start with trends. They start with intention. King Neptune has been part of Wrightsville Beach since 1947, the oldest restaurant in New Hanover County. And today, it has entered a bold new chapter. Under the ownership of Keating and Jimmy Galeese, and led by executive chef M. Ecker, King Neptune has been completely reimagined with a focus on quality, integrity, and care. Chef M's cooking is rooted in simplicity and comfort. Locally sourced ingredients, seed oil-free preparation, and dishes designed to nourish as much as they impress. From seafood and Maryland-style crab cakes inspired by her roots, to thoughtfully prepared chicken, beef, and seasonal vegetables, every plate tells a story. Discover coastal dining with purpose at neptuneswb.com. King Neptune, where intention meets the coast.
When their service is over, our veterans may have a new career and life to manage. We're here to help, providing more than $1 million a year in career-building scholarship funds and discounts on every haircut for veterans. Sport Clips Haircuts, supporting veterans everywhere.
Right now, if you're a Duke fan, you're pretty excited. They got a Big Four rivalry series win on Saturday at Cameron Indoor, 90-69 over Wake Forest. David, as we look specifically to the Duke Blue Devils, we continue to be impressed with Jon Scheyer's group. When you look at the Blue Devils, what is stepping out to you right now as something that they are doing that is just lifting them to the top of the ACC and perhaps even all of college basketball?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, Mike, that if you don't have enough talent, nothing else really matters all that much. But in this case, given Duke's obvious talent, starting with the freshman forward Cameron Boozer, who might just be the National Player of the Year, I'd say I've been most impressed lately by the Blue Devils improving execution, especially on defense. There was a stretch of games not long ago in which Duke allowed 5 consecutive opponents to shoot 50% or better from the field. And that is just absolutely positively not a sustainable trend for a team that wants to win championships, no matter how much talent they may have on hand. Sure enough, what was a potential weak link for Duke has improved significantly. And that is a tribute to both the coaching of Jon Scheyer and the coachability and the incremental improvement of this group of Blue Devils, several of whom will have very promising futures in the NBA. Nevertheless, they seem willing to learn on the fly. When Duke was on its West Coast road trip earlier this month and needed to execute a defensive game plan for that star freshman from Stanford, the guard Abuka Okori, who had put up 36 points on Carolina just 3 nights before the Devils had to deal with them, what happened? Duke executed that game plan almost to perfection. Scored not 36, but only 9 points against Duke, and the Devils ran away with an 80-50 victory. And it's important to note how Duke shut down Okori, the superstar freshman, and how the Blue Devils posted a 30-point road win over a pretty solid and definitely well-coached Stanford team. Everybody talks about Duke forward Malik Brown as one of the best defenders and one of the most valuable role players in all of college basketball, and I definitely agree. But it was actually another Duke player who rose to the occasion against Stanford. Now, for the record, Brown is 6'9", 225. He can guard all 5 positions. He's incredibly quick and athletic for his size. His hands are like warp speed suction cups on defense, getting some deflections, etc. And he rebounds and sets screens and runs the floor and doesn't seem to care much about his offensive numbers, which makes him essentially a perfect fit for this Duke team, which has plenty of more skilled options offensively. And remember, Duke loved what it saw from Malik Brown when he was at Syracuse 2 years ago. So the Devils lured him to Durham from the transfer portal prior to last season, and Malik Brown knew what his role would be. Here's the difference. The defensive star against Stanford was the freshman swingman from Europe, Dame Sarr. So Abuka Okori of Stanford is a guard listed at 6'2". Duke's primary defender on Abuka Okori was Dame Sarr, a 6'8", 190-pound swingman with long arms and plenty of athleticism. Dame Sarr stuck to Abuka Okori like adhesive tape in that game, and Okori made only 3 of his 9 field goal attempts, got to the free throw line only twice, failed to reach even 10 points for only the second time this season. It was brilliant team defense by Duke, but it was also brilliant individual defense by Sarr against the very talented but also smaller player. Duke did the opposite to Okori than Carolina did, and Duke did it with Sarr, who arrived in Durham as a projected NBA lottery pick. Brown was known and accepted as a guy who was going to have a very narrowly defined role at Duke. Dame Sarr may have had visions of being a superstar while wearing a Duke uniform. The guy is from Italy. He spent the last 2 years playing for FC Barcelona, one of the most famous professional organizations in European basketball. In retrospect, it's probably a good thing that Dame Sarr was an off-the-bench role player last year for Barcelona's top team in the top European league, because that roster is filled with old guys and European stars and longtime pros. So he, as a younger man, had to be a role player. As it's turned out in Durham, for all of his NBA lottery promise, Dame Sarr is only the 6th leading scorer for the Blue Devils. He's way behind Cameron Boozer. He's behind Isaiah Evans, behind Patrick Gongba, behind Caleb Foster. He's even behind Caden Boozer at only 6 points per game. And he's only playing about 20 minutes per game as a projected lottery pick. It is not always easy to convince a projected NBA lottery pick to take pride in being a defensive stopper, as Sarr clearly was against Okori and at other times this season. So kudos to John Shire and his staff for the obviously healthy culture they've created in Durham, and to Dame Sarr for being open-minded and embracing a role at Duke that might be significantly different and significantly smaller than whatever he may have been dreaming of when he arrived in the United States last summer. Duke's 18-1, so obviously the good far outweighs the bad, no matter how we slice it or how we break it down. But other teams are really good too. Arizona, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa State, Michigan State, Houston, Purdue, Gonzaga, UConn. They're really good. In the long run, among those best 10 or 15 teams, it's going to be about who keeps getting better, who's passionate about improving, who finds unselfish role players like Malik Brown, in this case, Dame Sarr, to support the star players who get more headlines and more attention and maybe more professional money down the road, and they do it without complaint and without personal agendas getting in the way. The Dame Sarr story at Duke looks to me like one more important step in the right direction for the extremely talented but somehow still improving Duke Blue Devils.
Coach Kerry Keating, you lead college basketball's hottest analytics company, Layup. And when you look at the Duke Blue Devils through that analytics lens, especially possession grading, shot value, and those turnover decision trees that we all know and love, what stands out right now? And is that the same kind of data that Layup uses to separate good basketball from good box scores?
Yeah, stats will travel and confirm what you see and what you know, both as a coach and as an observer, which actually leads me to the point that I'm shocked that DG hasn't brought back his Power of Five greatest favorite stat from last season when Cooper Flagg led the Blue Devils in all 5 major categories from a stat perspective: points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. By the way, now Cameron Boozer not too far behind, leading in 4 of those 5, on his way to potential National Player of the Year votes and a clear NBA contract on the horizon. But again, part of a young team. So when you take those stats, Mike, what you're really trying to figure out is Are they growing or are they surviving through those stats? And I think when you look at growth for a young team, it's the habit forming. Because again, with freshmen predominantly, not transfers per se, but freshmen, they only know what they know at the college level from where they're starting at, in this case, mostly at Duke. And although uber talented freshmen sprinkled in with some really good pointed transfers, when the habits start to show up, then you see the growth. If they were surviving, they'd probably need Cam Boozer to bail them out and have a hot shooting night. Now, Wake tried to double Cam Boozer yesterday, most notably in two simple actions that Duke ran, a cross screen and a down screen in the paint. And when they brought the double team, 2 of 4 of Cam Boozer's easy assists were to the guy right at the rim off the double team because they were worried about the guy coming off. Miscommunication notwithstanding on Wake's part, patience, and some habit forming for Cam Boozer, who's clearly showing some passing ability, not just in leading them in assists, but obviously in delivering when double teams were coming to take his point scoring away. So you want the consistent shot selection, the consistent defensive effort. This is where the stats will show up, Mike, is in the silent mistakes. And I say silent mistakes because we don't stat publicly missed box outs. We don't stat publicly late tags on roll-offs if we're going to double or we're going to help on a ball screen. We don't stat casual closeouts in public. Coaching staff does. What we can do is take all of those internal stats and really magnify them to show, are your habits forming and are they showing up in the results of the game, whether it's a chance to win or in this Duke's case, winning, or are they now becoming cover-ups? Are they becoming survival instincts? We talked about Carolina, not really defending great, but when you turn the ball over 4 times. So you can look at it from the outside lens of just the obvious. They shot it well, they scored a lot of points, they only turned over 4 times. It's the stats that don't show up. And again, go back to obviously our late great coach Dean Smith here, who started the plus point system of internal grading so that your coaches had visibility into why the points per possession were what they were. But the players took ownership in winning the assist award. And by the way, the assist award wasn't just I had 6 assists. I got a half of assist for every post feed that I made. So you're able to emphasize through this internal grading over all of the years of Carolina basketball and the tree that uses the plus point system to say a post feed is a half an assist. Now they take the ownership in, well, I had 12 assists in the game. No, you only had 6. Yeah, but I had 12 post feeds. Oh, wait. Well, if you had 12 post feeds, it's probably the reason why Caleb Wilson had 10 points in the post. So there's an if-then that comes with these silent stats. That's where the analytics now can get supercharged because we can take the internal, make them a little bit more visible internally, combined with the external to show, are we developing habits or are we just surviving? We don't stat 3 stops in a row publicly. There are plenty of teams. They call them 3-and-out punts. They call them turkeys, 3 strikes in a row, or just whatever term they want to put on it internally. Because the stats have shown that if you can get 3 stops in a row on 8 different occasions in a college basketball game, you're probably going to win the game for obvious reasons. It'll show up in your defensive numbers publicly, but privately, they may not know why they happen when you string them together. So again, do they respond to a punch and a guy being hot from 3 by getting a stop on the next 3 possessions? Or are they just freelancing and hoping that we're athletic enough to get a steal or block a shot, or maybe have a guy in the old Duke way of taking charges, whatever that may be? Can you translate that onto your bench so that your non-starters, non-stars are taking on their role to defend and rebound? It's a press conference go-to, defend and rebound. You say it, but what does it really mean? Analytics are out there a lot more. And I'll give credit to a lot of folks out there right now that are bringing these things to light. They're a lot more readily available for people to justify what they think and what they feel about their team because these numbers are showing it. But what we can do is take what actually matters to the staff, plug them into what's known, and create this fit model, not just for your evaluation of your players, but your own team to justify why and how to help the habits become a little bit more readily available and seen by your younger players that 9 times out of 10, if not more, are going to result of you being on the winning side or pretty close to it.
In college sports, the teams that win aren't always the most talented. They're the most organized. They study the film, they build the game plan, and they execute with clarity and purpose. Your life works the same way. At Organize for Success, productivity expert Emily Parks helps busy leaders create championship-level systems for work, family, side projects, and everything in between. For more than a decade, she's coached clients to prioritize what matters most and eliminate the chaos that slows them down. If you're ready to run your life with the same precision as a top program, visit organizeforsuccess.com and set up your complimentary call. Organize for Success. Win the day.
Forbes is going to have some type of a character building statement win for the old gold and black, but so far Jake Dickert's magic from Demon Deacon football has not found the sideline of Steve Forbes, and the Deeks go down again. They led early, but they're starting to get into some pretty dire territory with that record, and we're not even to Groundhog Day yet.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast when you talk about Duke, as I'm sure we'll explore shortly, and Wake, because most of what we would have to say about the Blue Devils is positive, and most of what we would have to say about the Demon Deacons is either negative or at least leaning in that direction. The short answer to the Wake Forest question is that whereas Duke and UNC and NC State either rank at the very top of the ACC in the case of the Blue Devils, or at worst in the top half of the 18-team ACC in the case of the Wolfpack and the Tar Heels, Wake Forest fits into the bottom half of the ACC right now, and I personally don't expect that to change this season. We shall see. We're not right about every team every year, obviously, but this Wake team, to me, is mostly who we thought it was and mostly what we discussed back in the preseason. And it has infinitely more to do with recruiting and roster construction, and in my opinion, very little to do with coaching. We all know Steve Forbes is in year 6 in Winston-Salem, and he hasn't taken the Demon Deacons to the NCAA tournament yet. But with all due respect to the players wearing the old gold and black right now, there is not a coach in the entire country who would lead this group at Wake right now to the big dance here in 2026. There is only one team in the top 9 in the ACC that I would say lacks at least one extraordinary talent. And some have 2 or 3 extraordinary talents. But the only one in the top half of the ACC that fits that description is the Clemson Tigers. The Tigers are extremely well coached by Brad Brownell, and their calling cards are fantastic off-the-charts team defense and an extremely unselfish pass first, balanced approach to scoring. It is very difficult to be an NCAA tournament that way, but Clemson is doing it as we speak. Wake Forest, I don't think, can follow that same formula. Wake Forest has an only all-ACC candidate. Shout out to Kerry Keating. He saw the brilliance of Juke Harris last year at Wake when Juke was only averaging probably 6 points per game. Now he's a 20 points per game scorer, Juke Harris. He's much improved from last season, and he's very difficult to defend. I also think that the Deeks have a pretty solid and definitely a tough and hardworking point guard in Nate Calmise, a Washington State transfer who is actually now at his 4th school in the past 4 seasons, like our guy Van Allen Lubin. For the 2nd year in a row, I'll also toss a bouquet at Trayvon Spillers, formerly of App State. He's a hardworking and scrappy but undersized post player for the Deeks. Guys like and Spillers can be very valuable pieces when they're role players surrounded by 2 or 3 star players. And Wake just doesn't have that star power this year. Quick flashback. Wake's best team in 6 years under Steve Forbes was probably the group from 2 years ago. Think of this lineup. Boopy Miller, now an all-ACC guy at SMU, was the Deeks point guard 2 seasons ago. Hunter Salas, NBA caliber guy, was on the wing. Cam Hildreth, also a future pro, not an NBA guy, but a good hard-nosed player, was also on the wing. Andrew Carr was at power forward. He ended up at Kentucky and then pro basketball. Efton Reed was at center, another not NBA guy, but future pro. That was like caliber Wake Forest basketball team. But they didn't have much depth. They lost too many close games. They stumbled down the stretch. They end up, of course, falling just on the wrong side of the Selection Sunday bubble. This Wake team does not have anything close to that talent base from 2 years ago. Just go position by position. It's a night and day difference. That doesn't mean they can't win big games this season, especially at home. The Deacs tend to be tough there, but they are running out of time for signature victories. They have NC State coming to Winston-Salem, Louisville coming to Winston-Salem this coming weekend and next weekend. Wolfpack this weekend, Louisville the following weekend. If they somehow win both of those games, then this conversation changes quite a bit. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about Steve Forbes being 0 for 6 in the NCAA tournament context. And that number feels extra bad for Wake fans in the context of seeing Duke get a high seed in that big dance. State and Carolina probably get into the big dance. And all three of those teams, to varying degrees, have more talent and are in much better position than the current Demon Deacons.
Kerry, and our other show that we do on basketball here on the North Carolina Sports Network called Court Vision with Vin Allen Lubin, have had a chance to go through Vin's journey as a college basketball player. In those first two coaching stops, he saw coaches come to this point in the season, late January, where they knew they probably weren't going to be back. So if you're in that Wake Forest program right now where you have been an assistant coach under Dave Odom back in the day, so you know about Wake Forest basketball and the people around that program, what's it like for Steve Forbes right now? Are the walls starting to close in? What's he feeling as a head coach?
They're most likely the poster child for the sign of the times right now. As David pointed out, they had an all-ACC caliber point guard in their program in Whoopi Miller. Did they know it then? Do they know it now? Remains to be seen. Hindsight's 2020. But they knew something ahead of time. It wasn't like all of a sudden he just became an all-ACC caliber player in 1 year at SMU. Yes, there's maturity, there's development, there's travel and experience. But I reference that and because what's clearly happening now, and this is maybe a question that we may not be able to answer right now because clearly contracts don't mean anything without collective bargaining or any sort of order in college athletics right now. But I really wonder if to try to get ahead of what might be inevitable and not let the players dictate your fate if you're Steve Forbes. If I'm on that staff, I'm doing whatever I can to sign Juke Harris to a multiple year contract or a contract for next year right now. Because clearly what's going to happen, if it hasn't happened already, and I have no insider knowledge of this, but I think it's a pretty easy speculation. There's already calls being made. Look, we know what it is. You can look across the line of where Juke has gone from A to B and almost in some cases A to like W, and we can get you to Z, Z being 2-3 million a year. If in fact we get to a end of the year decision on where their fate lies in the postseason, be it NCAA if some miraculous run happens, or NIT, or some other tournament, whatever it may be, or lack thereof. And all of a sudden, because of the timing in the portal and everything else that transpires, let's face it, the portal's open 365 days a year. It's all for show of the time that it's actually open. Football has proven that to be true. If you lose Juke Harris, I hate that as a coach, but this is the reality of a front office that's solid, which I think Steve has put in place. They've done a good job of evaluating, but they haven't put together the roster to get them over the hump, as DG pointed out. The one that they had when they could have gotten over the hump being get to the NCAA tournament. And there's too much now of immediacy in the powers that be to say, we can do this right now. Look at this guy. He did it right now. You have this money and you have an ability to go build a roster without transfer penalties. And you can go out and get talented freshmen. It's just a matter of where they fit on the salary scale. It's not that easy. And winning obviously cures a lot of those evils. But I think roster management and retention, and again, it's going to keep coming up, so I have to keep saying it, the fit in your program. And I'll give Brad a lot of credit on this because this is also an aspect that we do put into our pipeline at Layup, is a lot of these coaches are now finally coming around to the business aspect of building a team through personality testing. When I was with Buzz Peterson back in 2001 at Tennessee, He did this for all of us so he could manage us better. So I'll give Buzz the credit 2 decades ago doing this because you probably saw it in a business sense. This has been going on forever, whether it's Myers-Briggs, the grid that whatever it may be, a plethora of them now. And of course, our artificial intelligence can speed that process up to find the fit. But I know that Brad puts all of their kids through personality testing and it helps him manage his kids better. I'm not saying that's the answer. It's one part of what we have in this multimodal pipeline to help you develop fit. And then the predictive part of it that we have that can give you a path for improvement and development, which is elusive to these guys because they're all worried about now and tomorrow and they don't see what's in between. You can paint a picture for Juke Harris to stay, again, speculating, just making it up here. We'll pay you your value, whatever the market value is. There's no real set market value out there, but set the market value, show them a pathway, and try to do it together. The problem is Drew Karras isn't making the decision. I go back to John Curry being in the middle of all this and the GM at Wake Forest. There are so many different extenuating factors right now, but you would hate for it to be decided before it actually gets decided in the fact that someone has come along and doubled Juke's value from a money perspective. And you cannot fault kids for going and chasing the proverbial bag because that is life-changing money. If you manage it right, and you go about it, it is life-changing. You cannot fault them that. So there are all these things pulling and tugging. At the bottom of it is where can you end up and get to that place in the best manner? You hope that it would be where he started. But unfortunately, DG's guy, Boopy Miller, is not making a great case for the Demon Deacons. Didn't work out there, went someplace else, and is now flourishing. Juke may have had a better stint right now in his sophomore year at Wake than Boopy has had up until the time that he had at SMU as a comparison. But man, the onus really falls on you for player retention every single day. The relationships are always important, but you worked on those in the past. You recruited kids as sophomores and juniors. You went to see them in the summer. You wrote them letters. You sent emails. Then you were able to do text messages. Then you did the home visits. You got to know the entire group of people surrounding this kid. There was a trust factor there. There was a development plan. Graduation lingered at the end. Maybe even a second degree if you were going to redshirt and stay 5 years. There's so much more to pile into the bag, if you will. Now it's straight money and straight production, which accelerates the need for you to really have the strongest possible relationship with your players, especially your best ones, each and every day. Very exhausting, very tiring, which I go back why you need to have one on each side of you that can help you manage and help you coach. Because to put all that stress back on a head coach, especially in a contract year of sorts, man, I don't envy Steve at all.
Last year at Pitt, Jeff Capel's best player was the guard Jalen Lowe. He left Pitt. He's at Kentucky. The Panthers are gravitating toward the basement of the ACC. At Cal, the two best players were Andrei Stojakovic, Jeremiah Wilkinson, both underclassmen. They both hit the portal, neither to return. Cal has gravitated toward the bottom of the standings. Georgia Tech's starting point guard was Nate George. Syracuse actually lured him away. Georgia Tech loses its starting point guard under Damon Stoudemire, the legendary guard. The Yellow Jackets are gravitating toward the bottom of the standings. These are not mere coincidences, right? If you lose your one or two best players to the portal, it is going to be extraordinarily difficult for you to climb the conference ladder. And there are more examples. Those are just three that came right to mind. It's striking, and this happens in football too, but if you just become the feeder system for other schools and your best guys leave every year, you'll just never be better than mediocre. That's the new world we live in.
That's a great transition to where I wanted to take this show next. And that's talking about the excellence that is going on in the Piedmont Triad with High Point basketball. And all of the greatness of bold North State basketball is not just in the Big Four. When you go to the small college scene here in North Carolina, whether that be Division II or Division III, JUCO ball, or even the smaller Division I schools like High Point, man, they are building something really special, and that's taken place despite a coaching transition between Alan Huss, who is now back at Creighton as the head coach in waiting, and now the Flynn Clayman.
Yeah, let me give you a quick history lesson on this one. There's two key aspects to this fantastic story at High Point as I see it. One involves sustained success, which might be more rare than you think it is for the mid-majors and low majors, as they used to be called here in North Carolina. And the other does involve a smooth coaching transition. The Panthers have won 2 straight regular season titles in the Big South. They're working on a 3rd in the row as we speak. That's definitely rarefied air at the mid-major and low major levels in the bold North State, as we like to call it. Super smooth coaching transitions from winning head coach to winning head coach, which High Point obviously hopes to be doing right now with the transition from Alan Huss to Flynn Clayman, who had been Huss's assistant, by the way, also rare. The individual exceptions over the years in our backyard, the programs and coaches that had really impressive runs over an even longer period here in the bold North State include guys like Don Corbett at North Carolina A&T way back in the 1980s when I started covering this stuff. Remember Bobby Lutz with the Charlotte 49ers? Had it going at the end of the 90s and then the early 2000s. Our old friend Eddie Biedenbaugh had it going at UNC Asheville for a while. The legend Bob McKillop at Davidson had it going for most of his 30-plus years with the Wildcats. And then most recently, we've had Lavelle Moten at North Carolina Central. We had Wes Miller for a nice run at UNC Greensboro. Lavelle Moten, by the way, took the Eagles to 4 NCAA tournaments in a 6-year period not long ago. He, of course, is still the head coach at NC Central and might have another contender this season. Wes Miller led the UNCG Spartans to 3 regular season titles and 2 tournament titles. He's now at Cincinnati, of course. By the way, Kevin Keats, it was a shorter run, but he had a great 3-year run at UNC Wilmington. 3 first-place finishes in the CAA, 2 NCAA tournament trips in his 3 years there, before, of course, leaving for NC State. But those other guys I mentioned prior to Coach Keats, more sustained success over longer, or in some cases, like Bob McKillop, much, much longer periods. Secondly, quick fact to underline the rare nature of smooth coaching transitions. And we can't draw too many conclusions in the High Point example because this is just year 1 after Coach Huss left for Creighton. UNC Wilmington has been a Division I men's basketball program for roughly 50 years, okay, a half century. And it has gradually developed a pretty good reputation as a very high-quality mid-major program in what's now called the Coastal Athletic Association. In 5 decades of Seahawks basketball, how many smooth coaching transitions have there been? A winner leaves and the next guy hits the ground running and also wins. In a half century, there has been 1 example in 50 years. It's usually guy wins, guy loses, guy wins, even at a good program like UNCW. In 2002, the one and only exception to this rule in a half century of UNC Wilmington basketball, Jerry Wainwright had taken the Seahawks to 2 NCAA tournaments in the previous 3 seasons. He leaves to take the job at Richmond in the Atlantic 10. UNC Wilmington at the time opts to promote an assistant coach named Brad Brownell, yes, that guy, now at Clemson, to head coach of the Seahawks. Brad Brownell takes the baton, hits the ground running, former Wainwright assistant. He takes the Seahawks to 2 NCAA tournaments over the next 4 years before he leaves for the Wright State job in the Horizon League back then. That is the only example in 50 years of a truly smooth coaching transition at UNCW, which again is a relatively successful program. That should give folks some idea of how difficult it is to sustain winning at a high level at most Division I programs here and elsewhere. At most of these schools, for every head coach who works out well, there's 1 or more examples of head coaches who worked out poorly. And the final note on this one, Bob McKillop was the legendary head coach at Davidson for more than 30 years. He retired after the 2022 season. His son, Matt McKillop, was promoted to head coach of the Wildcats. Since that transition, and Matt McKillop's a smart guy and a good coach, Wildcats have not finished higher than 8th in their own league, the Atlantic 10, over these past 3 years, although they may finish a little higher than that this year. winning at a high level for a sustained period, man, it is hard. And it's usually even harder when the rising star head coach moves on to a bigger job, or in that case, the living legend head coach finally moves into retirement.
So, Kerry, is it tougher to do that type of continuity in this era of NIL? Is what has gone on at High Point with Clayman taking over from the 2 chair and rising up to be the head guy? Is that all the more impressive in this era of college basketball?
Look, we're talking to a captive audience here in the bold North State. I'm sure a handful of our subscribers and followers out there have actually been on High Point's campus, but for those that haven't, you might want to go check it out. All right. It's like a resort. Like, I think when you have that type of recruiting prowess to show these kids that even as a second landing area, it's a pretty good place to go to school, pretty good place to study. And it seems like it's a very welcoming environment for kids to come in. 7 kids from foreign countries. And when you look at what they did in the transfer portal, I think it's a great case study. David did a great job of pointing out the continuity and what's happened here with Alan Huss moving on to Creighton. They have a program identity that stayed intact. They're shooting 51% from the field. They're averaging over 90 points a game. They have some offensive prowess right now that needs to be studied. And obviously they did a great job in going out and not just sprinkling some high major talent, but getting kids from all walks and all different levels. I mean, look at the schools these kids came from: Xavier, Lamar, Southeast Missouri, Arizona, Cal State Northridge, Missouri State, Florida Gulf Coast, Liberty, UMKC, and UConn. That is, send me your tired, hungry, and poor. They are the Statue of Liberty of mid-major transfers. And by the way, their Ellis Island is pretty sweet. Like, they got a pretty good setup over there. So really kudos to them. And I got to be honest, I need to start watching them more. I'd really love to know how they're going about scoring all these points, why they're shooting such a big clip. They've clearly done a good job in identifying talent that fits their culture. And I think you can get, again, lost in the sauce of the money and try to go out and just plug and play into a tiered system that's being randomly set up by nobody out there and saying what value and market value really is. I know they probably have more resources than others, and you'll probably get a lot that'll cry spilt milk over that, but it is what it is, and they're taking advantage of probably not only some great facilities and a great campus, but a little bit of financial backing that's helping them get to that point. They're probably not a team you want to see as a 12, 13, or 14 seed come NCAA tournament time if they're, in fact, that team that gets through to represent the conference, because teams like that can travel. Teams that can score a lot of points and have that type of experience. And I love the fact that they're from top to bottom with all the transfers, not just the influx of foreign kids, but all the different levels. They did a tremendous job of going out and identifying kids that may be maligned or may have had some success at other places. Whatever the reason is these kids are leaving these other programs, it's not just, hey, average 10 here, come here. Case in point, Kyan Evans at Carolina. It's, does he fit? Can we actually evaluate him? And I think that staff clearly up to this point has done a great job in this season with this roster of evaluating kids that fit their roster, and the transfer and culture that has happened in the coaching change by keeping it intact and staying true to that, knowing if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is clearly working for High Point right now.
This is the North Carolina Sports Network. From the high country to the Outer Banks, on courts, fields, and fairways, we tell the stories of the bold North State. Follow us on social media at the NC Sports Net. We're the exclusive home of the David Glen Show, coach-driven analysis of football and basketball. A look at the past with This Was Then, Inside NIL with Court Vision, the North Carolina Sports Awards, aka the Pineys, and the Old North State Tailgate, where we are on the ground at North Carolina's top events. Our foundational partner is NC Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar. Telling the stories of the bold North State. Experience matters. This is NCSN, the North Carolina Sports Network.